Every crime is a wound on the world. We're here to dissect it, layer by layer, to find the truth buried within. This is Anatomy of Crime. It is a warm, bright Friday afternoon in Prairie View, Texas. The date is July 10, 2015. The sun beats down on University Drive, a relatively quiet stretch of road leading toward Prairie View A&M University. Inside a silver Hyundai Sonata, 28-year-old Sandra Bland is driving with a sense of purpose and renewed optimism. She has just accepted a new job at her alma mater, a position as a summer program outreach worker. For Sandra, this represents a fresh start, a return to a place she loves, and a chance to make a tangible difference in the lives of young students. She is a woman known for her vibrant voice, her deep engagement in civil rights issues, and her popular video series called Sandy Speaks, where she passionately discusses systemic injustice and police brutality. As she navigates the Texas roads, she is entirely unaware that she is about to become the center of a national tragedy, a tragedy that will begin with the most mundane of infractions. Today, we dissect the anatomy of a traffic stop. We will examine the precise mechanisms of police escalation, the minute-by-minute breakdown of a situation spiraling out of control, and the devastating consequences of a system that fails to protect those in its custody. The encounter begins at 4:27 p.m. Texas Department of Public Safety Trooper Brian Encenia is on patrol. Encenia is a 29-year-old officer who has been with the department for just over a year. He is driving in the opposite direction when he spots Sandra Bland's Hyundai. He makes a U-turn and begins to follow her. Sandra notices the police cruiser rapidly approaching her rear bumper. Reacting to the closely trailing vehicle, she changes lanes to the right to allow the officer to pass. In doing so, she fails to use her turn signal. This is a Class C misdemeanor in Texas, a minor traffic violation that typically results in a warning or a small fine. Encenia immediately activates his overhead lights. Sandra pulls over to the right side of the road, stopping her car near the intersection of University Drive and Waller County Line Road. From a purely legal standpoint, the initial stop is justified by the traffic code. However, the anatomy of what happens next reveals a profound breakdown in communication, de-escalation training, and basic human empathy. Encenia approaches the passenger side of the Hyundai. The dashcam footage from his cruiser captures the entire audio and visual sequence of the interaction. He introduces himself, informs Sandra that she is being recorded, and states the reason for the stop. He asks for her driver's license and insurance. Sandra provides the documents. Her demeanor is noticeably irritated. She is a woman who is acutely aware of the fraught history between law enforcement and Black Americans, and she has just been pulled over moments after securing a life-changing job. When Encenia returns to his cruiser to run her information, he spends several minutes checking her background. He finds no outstanding warrants. He writes up a written warning, not a citation. Up to this exact moment, the interaction, while tense, remains within the standard parameters of a routine traffic stop. The officer has decided not to issue a ticket. The matter should theoretically be concluded in a matter of seconds. Encenia walks back to the driver's side of the Hyundai. The situation is about to shift irreparably. He hands Sandra her license and the warning. Then, he makes a seemingly innocuous observation that acts as the catalyst for the ensuing disaster. He asks Sandra if she is okay, noting that she seems very irritated. Sandra responds with complete honesty. She tells him that she is indeed irritated. She explains that she only changed lanes to get out of his way because he was speeding up behind her. and now she is being penalized for failing to signal during that evasive maneuver. Encinias, rather than acknowledging her frustration or simply explaining that the stop is over with a warning, takes a different path. He notices she is smoking a cigarette and asks her to put it out. This is the critical juncture. The anatomy of escalation often hinges on perceived challenges to authority. Sandra is sitting inside her own vehicle. She is not under arrest. The traffic stop is essentially complete. She asks Encinias why she has to put out her cigarette when she is in her own car. Legally, an officer can order a driver out of a vehicle during a lawful stop, a precedent established by the Supreme Court case Pennsylvania v. Mims. However, asking someone to extinguish a cigarette is a request, not an explicitly mandated command for officer safety, unless it directly interferes with the investigation. When Sandra questions the necessity of his request, Encinias' tone changes drastically. The polite, bureaucratic demeanor vanishes. He immediately orders her to step out of the car. The rapidity of this escalation is staggering. Within the span of a few seconds, a request to put out a cigarette transforms into a lawful order to exit the vehicle. Sandra refuses. She questions his authority to make her leave her car over a failure to signal. Encinias does not explain his reasoning. He does not attempt to de-escalate. He repeats the order, his voice rising in volume and intensity. He opens her car door. He tells her she is under arrest. When Sandra asks what she is being arrested for, Encinias refuses to tell her. This lack of communication fuels her confusion and justifiable anger. The dashcam captures the escalating verbal confrontation. Encinias reaches into the car, attempting to physically extract her. Sandra pulls back. It is at this moment that Encinias unholsters his taser, points it directly at her face, and screams the phrase that will become synonymous with the brutality of this encounter. He yells, "I will light you up." Faced with a lethal or near-lethal weapon aimed at her head, Sandra complies. She exits the vehicle. The camera captures them moving out of the frame, to the passenger side of the cruiser. The audio continues to record the physical altercation that ensues. Encinias orders her to put her phone down. Sandra is heard crying out in pain, stating that Encinias is about to break her wrists and that he has knocked her head into the ground. She screams that she has epilepsy. Encinias' response is a dismissive, "Good." Another officer arrives on the scene, but no attempt is made to calm the situation or intervene in the physical takedown. Sandra Bland is handcuffed, placed in the back of the cruiser, and charged with assault on a public servant. The written warning for failing to signal, the original reason for the stop, is entirely forgotten in the wake of the manufactured chaos. To understand this event, we must analyze the psychology of the traffic stop. Law enforcement training often emphasizes taking control of a situation. However, this emphasis on control can easily morph into an ego-driven demand for absolute submission. When Sandra questioned the cigarette request, Encinias perceived it not as a civil inquiry, but as a threat to his authority. His response was punitive. He used the legal mechanism of ordering her out of the car as a tool of compliance, not a measure of safety. The escalation was completely asymmetrical. A woman expressing verbal annoyance was met with the threat of electroshock weaponry and physical violence. The anatomy of this escalation shows a systemic failure to differentiate between a citizen's legal right to question authority and a physical threat to an officer. Sandra Bland is transported to the Waller County Jail in Hempstead, Texas. The intake process at a county jail is designed to assess the medical and mental health needs of incoming inmates to ensure their safety while in state custody. During her booking, Sandra fills out several forms. On a mental health questionnaire, she checks a box indicating that she has previously attempted suicide. She notes that she had lost a baby the year prior. She also indicates that she is currently feeling very depressed. Despite these massive red flags, which, under standard jail procedures, should trigger an immediate mental health evaluation and placement on suicide watch, she is placed in a general population cell. She is housed alone. The weekend passes slowly. Sandra's bail is set at $5,000, meaning she needs to secure $500 to be released. She makes several phone calls from the jail. She calls her sister, explaining the absurd and violent nature of her arrest. She leaves a voicemail for a friend, her voice heavy with exhaustion and despair, wondering how a simple failure to signal resulted in her sitting in a jail cell. Her family scrambles to gather the funds to bond her out. They are hundreds of miles away in Illinois, trying to navigate the Texas legal system over the phone. Over the course of the weekend, jail logs indicate that guards checked on her intermittently, but these checks were often visual glances through a window, not meaningful interactions to assess her well-being. On the morning of Monday, July 13th, at approximately 7 o'clock, a jailer brings Sandra her breakfast. According to the guard, Sandra refuses the food, telling him she is not hungry. At 7:55 a.m., Sandra requests to use the telephone. She makes a call, but there is no answer. This is the last time she is seen alive. Less than an hour later, at 8:58 a.m., a female guard looks into cell number 95. She discovers Sandra Bland hanging from the privacy partition in the cell. The ligature used is a plastic trash bag, the kind typically used to line the small waste baskets provided to inmates. The response is immediate but futile. Emergency medical personnel are called. CPR is attempted, but rigor mortis has already begun to set in. Sandra Bland is pronounced dead. The local authorities immediately declare the death a suicide. The Waller County Sheriff's Office releases a brief statement to the public. However, the rapidity of the ruling and the deeply suspicious circumstances surrounding her arrest immediately ignite a firestorm of doubt. Sandra's family, knowing her vibrant personality, her new job, and her deep knowledge of civil rights, categorically reject the idea that she would take her own life over a minor arrest. They demand an independent autopsy and a full federal investigation. The autopsy report, conducted by the Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences, confirms the cause of death as asphyxiation due to hanging, and the manner of death is officially ruled a suicide. The medical examiner details the physical evidence. The ligature mark around Sandra's neck is consistent with a self-inflicted hanging, angling upward toward the back of the neck. There are defensive wounds or signs of a struggle that would indicate someone else was in the cell. However, the autopsy also reveals deep bruising on her wrists and back, consistent with the violent physical takedown executed by Trooper Encenia during the arrest. The physical evidence of the hanging may point to suicide, but the anatomical timeline of events points directly to the traumatic stress of the unlawful arrest and the gross negligence of the jail staff. The release of the dashcam footage transforms the case from a local tragedy into an international outrage. The video is scrutinized frame by frame. Independent analysts note strange anomalies in the original video released by the Department of Public Safety. Cars appear and disappear, and audio loops over disjointed video sequences. The state claims these were simple rendering errors during the upload process, but in an atmosphere already thick with distrust, the glitches are viewed as evidence of a cover-up, When a corrected, continuous version of the video is finally released, the unvarnished reality of the stop is laid bare. The public sees exactly how quickly a heavily armed officer escalated a minor traffic violation into a brutal physical confrontation. The phrase, "I will light you up," becomes a rallying cry against police violence. The legal fallout from the case is complex and deeply frustrating for those seeking justice. In December 2015, a Waller County grand jury declines to indict any jail staff for their role in Sandra's death, finding no criminal culpability in their failure to properly monitor a mentally vulnerable inmate. However, the same grand jury indicts Trooper Brian Encinias on a misdemeanor charge of perjury. The indictment alleges that Encinias lied in his police report when he claimed he ordered Sandra out of the vehicle so he could safely conduct a traffic investigation. The dashcam footage clearly contradicts this claim, showing that he only ordered her out after she refused to extinguish her cigarette. Following the indictment, the Texas Department of Public Safety formally fires Encinias. The perjury charge offers a glimmer of accountability, but it is ultimately resolved through a controversial plea deal. In 2017, the special prosecutor agrees to drop the perjury charge entirely in exchange for Encinias permanently surrendering his Texas law enforcement license and agreeing never to work in law enforcement in any capacity again. For the Bland family, this is a bitter pill to swallow. The officer whose actions directly precipitated Sandra's death will face no criminal record and no jail time. He simply walks away from the profession. The family does file a wrongful death civil lawsuit against Waller County and the Department of Public Safety. In 2016, the lawsuit is settled for $1.9 million. As part of the settlement, Waller County agrees to implement significant changes to its jail procedures, including providing automated electronic sensors to ensure timely cell checks and having an on-duty medical professional available for all shifts. The most enduring legislative legacy of this tragedy is the Sandra Bland Act, passed by the Texas legislature in 2017. The act mandates sweeping reforms in how law enforcement interacts with the public and how jails operate. It requires de-escalation training for all officers, emphasizing techniques to calm volatile situations rather than relying on immediate force. It prohibits officers from using pretextual stops as a primary method for searching vehicles. Crucially, it overhauls jail intake procedures, requiring rigorous mental health screening, improved training for jailers on recognizing mental distress, and the immediate diversion of inmates with severe mental health issues to specialized facilities rather than solitary confinement in a county jail. Yet, despite these systemic changes, the core anatomy of the case remains a stark reminder of the fragile nature of civil liberties during a traffic stop. The dashcam footage of Sandra Bland's arrest serves as a permanent, undeniable textbook example of how the lethal combination of bruised police ego, unchecked authority, and implicit bias can turn a routine encounter into a fatal event. Sandra Bland was an educated, vocal woman who knew her rights and attempted to exercise them. She was met with a system that demanded immediate, unquestioning obedience under the threat of violence, and a custodial environment that completely ignored her profound distress. Her death was not just the result of a ligature in a solitary cell, but the inevitable culmination of an escalating chain of state-sanctioned aggressions that began the very second a turn signal was forgotten. This has been Anatomy of Crime, where the truth is never simple, but always worth seeking.